Hey everyone, this is Pallavi and I'm back with the 33rd game of the book Logical Chess Move by Move, which is the last game. And this game was played between Rubinstein and Maroczy in Gothenburg in 1920. The opening played in this game was Queen's Gambit declined. Let's start. So white starts with d4, occupies the center and makes way for the c1 bishop and the queen is also protecting the pawn. Knight f6. The knight develops towards the center, exerting immediate pressure on squares d5 and e4. This prevents white from forming a pawn structure by e4. Now, white played knight f3. White prioritizes kingside piece development, enabling early castling. The knight at f3 becomes a valuable attacking piece and a strong defender from after castling. d5. Black neutralizes white's central pressure and open lines for two of his own pieces, the bishop and the queen. c4. Rarely a non-developmental pawn move becomes opportune. This move attacks black's center and increases white's piece mobility. It clears the diagonal for the queen and opens up the c file for potential use by the queen or by the rook later. e6. Black supports the d-pawn with another pawn. If white breaks the center with c takes d5, black is prepared to recapture with a pawn to maintain control over d5. Playing e6 has the drawback of limiting the c8 bishop's development, but it's still black's best move. For now, the bishop on f8 has plenty of space to move. After e6, white played bishop to g5, developing the bishop while pinning the knight. Black played bishop to e7. Unpinning the knight restricts the bishop defensively due to white's pressure. Still, black's move advances development, placing the bishop defensively and enabling castling. e3. In the opening, pawns should be moved minimally. However, some pawn moves are essential to activate the bishops as part of the developing strategy. Knight b d7. In the queen's gambit declined, the b8 knight's ideal development square is d7 and not c6. From d7, white supports potential pawn thrusts toward white's center. Then it supports the potential pawn thrust, and avoiding c6 is essential to allow the c pawns advance to c5, controlling the b4 square and attacking the center. So after knight b d7, white played knight c3. The white queen's knight at c3 is well placed, unblocking the c pawn and controlling the vital central squares, which is d5 and e4. Castle. Black castles king f3, castling as early as possible. Rook c1. The rook is developed for attacking prospects, placed at c1 to exert pressure along the partially open c file. Controlling the c file is crucial in the queen's gambit, making c1 the preferred position for the rook. Black played rook e8. Black's rook moves to a central file, ready to contribute to center-related actions. Its influence grows stronger with each clearance on the file. Queen c2. The queen finds optimal position on the board at c2. From there, it exerts pressure on the c file and takes control of the center, creating difficulties for black in finding freedom. Now, black played d takes c4. Black impatiently tries to break loose, delaying the capture and waiting for white's f1 bishop move could have been better. Choosing c6 would strengthen the d5 pawn's position and offer the queen an outlet to the queen side. So after d takes c4, black captured with the bishop, recapturing the pawn and simultaneously developing it. c5. Black must counterattack to establish a tension and dispute control in the center. This prepares for opposing rooks on the c file, striving for equality for the file. Castle. White continues developing, moving the king to the safety and bringing the h1 rook closer to the center. c takes d4. Black pressures white to decide on the center. If white recaptures with a pawn, it leads to an isolated pawn. Otherwise, the pawn center remains equal to black's. Knight takes d4. Rubinstein prefers this move over e takes d4 to avoid creating an isolated pawn in the center. An isolated pawn lacks pawn support, and the square in front of it can be occupied by enemy pieces without fearing of being driven away by pawns. However, an isolated pawn in the center has its strengths, such as controlling the key squares supporting outposts like knight at e5. So after knight takes d4, black played a6. The move mainly secures the b5 square from white's minor piece invasion. However, non-developmental pawn moves waste valuable opening time. Instead, a more effective approach is knight e5, attacking the bishop on c4. If the bishop moves to b3, bishop d7, rook fd1, bringing the rook to the open file, and then queen b6 aims to activate black's pieces. The white has made essential pawn moves, either freeing up pieces or enhancing the mobility of developed ones. Each move, whether piece or pawn, contributes to white's development and increases its potential strength. a6. So after a6, white played rook fd1. The rook moves to the center and at the head of a file facing the queen. White has brought his queen, rooks, bishops, and knight to almost ideal squares in one move each. Black played queen a5. The queen flees the line of fire, gaining a little time by attacking the bishop. Bishop h4. The bishop retreats but maintains the pressure on the knight. Knight e5. Now the other bishop is threatened. Apparently with more gain of time for black. Bishop e2. Despite being pushed back, both bishops hold significant latent power. The potential of having two bishops working harmoniously is not to be underestimated. As a result, white avoids moves like bishop d3, which allows black to exchange, a short-range knight for a long-range bishop with knight takes d3. In summary, it is advantageous to retain both bishops. So after bishop to b2, now black played knight g6. Moving to the king side, the knight attacks the dark squared bishop, pushing it back. Barriers are forming around black's king. Despite gaining time with attacks on white's bishop, black should have developed queenside pieces like with bishop d7. This would lead to knight b3 attacking the queen, then queen c7, queen to b1, bishop to c6, offering reasonable fighting chances. So after knight g6, white played bishop g3, bishop saves itself and now it commands a magnificent diagonal. e5. It occupies the center. It opens a path for the c8 bishop. It cuts down the scope of white's g3 bishop. It will drive off the knight from its centralized position. So these are the advantages of e5 move. After e5, white played knight b3. Moves away and attacks the queen as well. Queen c7, the queen evades the attack and black prepares to regroup his pieces perhaps by bishop d7 and then bishop to c6 and then rook a d8. So after queen c7, white played queen b1. That's a good move. White's position improves despite making 5 consecutive retreating moves. Although pushed back to the first 3 ranks, his pieces gain dynamic energy. Gradually, they will secure stronger positions, dominate the board, and force the enemy to retreat. Black has no time to develop his c8 bishop, as after bishop to d7, then knight d5, it's a discovered attack, queen d8, and then knight c7 wins the exchange. So after queen b1, black played queen to b8. Black's queen retreated due to a discovered attack threat, while white's queen moved voluntarily to b1. The differences in their positions are clear. White's queen doesn't obstruct the rook's controlling two open files. Black's queen and bishop separate the rooks with one rook trapped and the other rook's movement is severely limited. And then white has two agile long range bishops, e2 and g3 bishop. Black has one developed bishop with the other still at home. And white's queen can swiftly engage in the action, while black's queen must stay on the fringes of the board. So after queen b8, white played bishop to f3. The bishop seizes the long diagonal and prevents black from playing b5. Now black played queen a7. Black's maneuvers are complex, aiming to position the rook on b8, followed by b5, and eventually developing the queen's bishop to b7. So after queen a7, now white played knight a5, a good move, a brilliant preventive move. It stops rook b8, followed by b5. Since then, knight c6 wins the exchange. Additionally, the direct bishop d7 or bishop to e6, then knight takes b7, leading black losing a pawn. So after knight a5, black played bishop to b4. Black tries to chase off the knight. Knight c4. The knight must leave, but in compensation, it enjoys the advantage of being nearer the center. Bishop d7. The bishop moves to the only square available for its development. Knight d5. The knight leaps to d5, attacking multiple pieces. It threatens one bishop with knight takes b4, and the other indirectly with knight takes f6 check, g takes f6, and then rook takes d7. Additionally, it poses a threat, knight c7, targeting both the rooks and possibly winning the exchange. So after knight d5, black played knight takes d5, and then the dangerous piece must be removed. White captured with the bishop, threatening bishop takes f7 check, king takes f7, and rook takes d7 check. After bishop takes d5, black played bishop e6, trying to exchange the bishops. White played queen e4. The queen's centralization and support have significant effects. Supports the bishop at d5, enhances the attack on the b pawn, aids in the attack on the e pawn, and indirectly threatens black's b4 bishop. After queen e4, black played bishop takes d5, practically forced in view of many threats. Rook takes d5. Another piece attacking the e5 pawn, simultaneously making way for the other rook to double up on the d file. Rook a c8, protecting the pawn directly by pinning one of its attackers. Rook c d1, doubling up the rooks on an open file, while white's knight is now unpinned and the attack on the e pawn is renewed. Bishop f8. Black transfers the exposed bishop to defense. Also, after rook c d1, there is a threat of discovered attack on the bishop as well. So after bishop a8, white played b3. Frees the queen from the duty of guarding the knight, as the pawn is now supporting it. And if black plays f5, then white can simply capture with the queen, because the knight is now supported by the pawn. Okay, so after b3, instead of b3, if black plays knight takes e5, then f6, putting pressure on the pinned piece, gains black a knight. So b3, then b5. The purpose is not only to dislodge the knight, but also to open a line for the queen, allowing her to return to the king side for the king's defense. White played knight to d6, a knight fork which will force an exchange, a simplification to white's advantage. Bishop take d6, only move, then rook takes d6, threatening to place the rook on the 7th rank by rook d7. The posting of a rook on the 7th rank in the middle game or the ending is a tremendous positional advantage. Rook c7, stopping white's rook d7 plan. White has a superior position. As white's rooks control the d file, open d file effectively. The strongly centralized queen exerts pressure on all directions. The bishop targets the e pawn and keeps a rook and knight engaged to its defense. So white played. So all of the white spaces are well utilized. h4. Threat is h5, dislodging the knight and then capturing the e pawn. It compels black to protect the pawn with f6, weakening the pawns near the king. This may induce further weaknesses with h5 and h6, targeting the g pawn. So black played f6 to support the e5 pawn. If had black played rook ce7 to support the e5 pawn, then queen c6 followed by rook d8 with an easy win. Instead, if black played h5, then queen to f5, winning the h pawn. So after f6, white played queen d5 check. Simple and strong. The queen powerfully enters at d5, controlling a diagonal towards the king and simultaneously tripling on the d file. Black played king h8 and then white played h5. This move not only evicts the knight from its strong defensive post but also introduces a division in black's position. Knight f8. If knight e7, then queen f7 with million threats. So after knight f8, h6. White further drives the division. The goal is to disrupt the pawn formation and around the black's king. If the g pawn can be removed, it will leave the f pawn, the foundation of black's king, susceptible to attack. Once the f pawn falls, black's entire position crumbles. So after h6, black played knight g6. Black gets his knight back into active play and prevents white from striking again at the f pawn by bishop h4. So after knight g6, white played queen e6. A remarkable move. White's intention isn't to show off by offering a queen sacrifice. Instead, the goal is to penetrate deeper into black's position, and this move is the most straightforward approach to achieve that. Let's look at the threats. So on the 8th rank, by queen takes e8 check, knight f8, queen takes f8 checkmate. On the 7th rank, rook d7 and then followed by h takes d7 checkmate. And on the 6th rank, h takes d7 check, king takes g7 and then queen takes f6. So after queen e6, if black captures rook takes e6, then rook d8 check, rook e8, rook takes, knight f8, rook takes and checkmate. So after queen e6, black played rook f8, giving the f pawn added protection. Now white played rook d7, threatening h takes g7 and it's a checkmate because the queen is controlling the g8 square and the rook will be protecting the pawn. So after rook d7, black played g takes h6 and then white played bishop h4 and black resigned. The bishop, which has stood in one spot for 25 moves, applies the finishing touch. The threat is, let's say if, the threat is actually bishop takes f6, takes, queen takes f6, king g8 and queen g7 checkmate. If black captures the knight with the knight, then queen e7 threatening queen takes h7 checkmate or queen g7 checkmate or queen takes f8 checkmate. So a truly impressive and immensely gratifying game, regarded as one of the finest game in the history of chess. So from this game, we also learned some principles. So those principles are: occupy the center with pawns, rapid piece development towards the center, castle as early as possible, Do not move too many pawns or a pawn unnecessarily in the opening. Non-developmental pawn moves waste valuable opening time. Bring your rooks on open files and bishops on open diagonals. It is an advantage to keep both bishops on the board in open positions. Thank you for watching. Please like, comment and share and subscribe to my channel. Thank you. Bye-bye.